Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of the Sharks Cardfight Vanguard matches. We're going to get right into this one today. We have Bailey playing the new Chaos, and we have Josh playing his Dark Irregular Scharhrot deck. Josh is going to go ahead and ride a Grade 1 and call his starting Vanguard diagonally to it. Bailey might be reading the cards in this one because these are actually both Josh's decks. He just wanted to pick up the Chaos deck in order to play it for another video. Bailey is also just going to ride up to Grade 1 in an attack, getting a useless heal trigger right now, but would be useful later on for G-Guardians. And Josh is getting a stand on the damage, which means his counter charging may not be as efficient because it's out of the deck. Josh rides up and attacks, and gets a heal trigger on the attack, which puts him back to 0 damage. Bailey is going to ride up to Grade 2 and swing, mostly a normal game so far, no rushing from either of the decks, but that's also not what either of them are trying to accomplish. Josh is going back to 1 damage now, and thinking about what he's going to do on this turn. And he's going to ride up to a Grade 3 Vampire, and he's actually going to get the Grade 2 skill, which activates when a Grade 3 is placed on top of it to Soul Charge 1. And then he's activating the Vampire skill to Counterblast 1, and put as many Darkness cards from the top 5 cards, I believe, into his Soul, and it gets plus 1k for each of them until the end of the turn. He puts Enigmatic Assassin, a Grade 3 Scharhrot, and 2 stand triggers into the Soul. This skill is very useful for thinning out the deck. And for the Grade 3, later on his first stride, he can add it back to his hand if he has one in the Soul. The Enigmatic Assassin is very useful for the Gilderai turns that come later on. Josh gets 1 crit on his first attack, and Bailey is going to 3 damage now. It looks like Bailey has no Grade 3 in his hand, and he's going to check the top 5 for one, and ends up not getting one, so a little unlucky for him, especially since that last damage was a Grade 3. Sorry for cutting out that damage, I didn't really get the right shot for this one. Bailey decides to just attack, it's the only other option he has, because Josh cannot Sid Breeze with only 1 face-up damage. Josh can now decide to call more units, which he ends up doing. He gets to use that Grade 2 skill to check a top 7 and put 1 Darkness unit into the Soul, I believe, whenever it's called to rearguard. It just helps to thin out the deck more, and he was going to call it anyways because since Bailey is still at a Grade 2, he wants to put more pressure on him because he knows he does not have a Grade 3 in his hand. Now Josh is swinging with the rearguard column first because he does run stands in his deck. I'm not sure how many, I think he may run 6, and he actually gets one here. And so he gets to swing with a 14k again. Bailey's going to end up taking this damage. It looks like that puts him at 4 damage. And off the top of his deck, Bailey gets a old Chaos Breaker, which is really not the ideal ride target. He's not useful at all, and in some cases he can be useful, but the newer one is way better, and it would give Bailey a lot more locks in this situation. Bailey, one of the first times using the deck is deciding what to go into first, and he reads the Stride Fodder skill to try to get the newer Grade 3 into his hand, but ends up whiffing once again, not getting any off the top 7, I believe. So he uses his Stride skill here to lock a card from Josh's hand anywhere on the field, and he gets to choose where it goes. And then he uses his starter skill to shove it to the Soul when his opponent has a locked card, and he gets to get a Grade 1 to his hand, or is it call it? I'm not sure what the skill is. Either way, that's going to be called to the field, and in front of it is going to be a Strange Dragon. Again, he's just confirming what the cards do. And he's going to call out this other Grade 2. Not sure what the name is, but the skill is he gets to choose a card from the drop zone and call it as a locked card, and then that card gets plus 3 for each locked card on his opponent's field, so it's going to get a plus 6 total. Unfortunately, it doesn't hit the magic number of 16k, but it's enough to still force a 10k shield, or a 5k shield from Josh's hand instead of not being able to hit the Vanguard. And Bailey's going to go ahead and swing with his Vanguard, getting 1 crit, and that's all for his triggers. Josh is now at 4 damage. And he decides to swing at the rear guard because it'll force more guard out of his opponent's hand. And with Strange Dragon skill, he gets to lock another card when it attacks. So Josh's field is entirely locked, but he does leave that front row rear guard open for another attack next turn. And Josh just simply guards that attack with a 10k. Moving on to Josh's turn. He strides into the first stride that Dark Irregulars usually use. He gets to counterblast 1 with that card, flip something else face up, soul charge 3, and for each different grade put into the soul, he gives a unit +5. And I believe the requirement for the next part is a certain amount of cards in the soul. He gets to add a grade 3 from his soul back to his hand. And which he will add a Scharhrot grade 3 back to his hand with that skill. And he also used the grade 1 new Stride Fodder skill. Since it was put into soul, he gets to counterblast 1 whenever that happens and draw 1 card. And he gets the stand trigger, I think off the top of the deck, which lets him countercharge, and he gets another one as well. Lets him countercharge, get another soul charge, and draw a card. Which is essentially just thinning the deck more, while allowing him to get more resources to use counterblasts on other turns. And finally, Josh is going to swing with his Vanguard because he knows that he's mostly out of stands from the deck, besides the ones he put back in from using their skills. And Bailey is going to G-Guard here. I believe that card is one of the new G-Guards. If your opponent has a certain amount of locked cards, maybe 1, you get to Soul Blast a card to draw a card, which can get him more guard. Maybe he's fishing for a PG, because it doesn't look like he has one in his hand, and he guards with more. Then Josh swings with his rear guard. I'm actually not too sure the skill of this one. I think it gets power for each card in your soul, which is why he's counting them. Swinging at the Vanguard, and Bailey takes it anyways. And he falls over to the ground, meaning I'm assuming that was a grade 3. And at the end phase of Josh's turn, he gets to use the Vampire skill to shove a Darkness card into his soul and draw 1, but he doesn't get the other part of the skill because he doesn't have, I think it requires 15 cards in the soul, maybe 10. And then since Bailey's on the original Chaos Breaker, he will choose to target only 1 unit to Soul Blast 1, retire it, and draw a card. And now it's the start of his turn. We know he has more Stride Fodders in his hand, so he can stride, definitely. Let's see what he goes into. And Bailey's going to go into Glue Ball Dragon. I think it's a really nice second stride. It's a lot better when you have the new Chaos Breaker, though, because your opponent will have more lock cards on the field. Now Bailey's going to use Glue Ball skill to lock 2 cards on Josh's side of the field. I'm not too familiar with this card skill either, but I know, I believe it's your front row units get power for each card that's locked. So he's going to be swinging with his Vanguard first. Because the Chaos Breaker deck runs crits, and I think this one runs draws, no stands in this one. And Josh is going to G-Guard. And guard with an additional 10k, making it no to pass. Bailey is fortunately going to get a heal, healing that grade 3 from his damage. I believe that puts him back at 4, I think he was at 5 before. You can't really see the damage at all right now. And then he's swinging with his weaker rear guard to the Vanguard. Josh is still at 4 damage, so he can afford to take one of these attacks. Then he's swinging with the bigger column. And Josh is just explaining to Bailey what these cards do so he knows better how to play out his turn. Looks like Josh is going to guard with a 10k shield. That one gets plus 5k shield more. Its own skill gives it more shield, and it goes to the soul after it's done guarding. So that's what he's going to use now. And then he guards with the additional card that lets him switch a card from his hand and his soul. Now it's Josh's turn. He's going to go onto his second stride turn. Let's see what he goes into here. His options are he can go into the card that puts all grade zeros from your soul and field back into the deck, because it looks like Josh has a very small deck right now. But he ends up deciding to go into Gilderai. I believe that's just because he knows that he got the Enigmatic Assassin very early on in the game, which he can call out when Gilderai attacks in order to give it another 15k boost. And if you guys are somehow unfamiliar with Gilderai, it has a guard restrict on your opponent where they can't use grade 1s or higher to guard it. And Josh is just calling out another field just in case his Gilderai attack does not work this turn. And he is going the route of just swinging with a huge number with an additional crit and the guard restriction, so Bailey just says no guard. Josh ends up getting a heal and a crit trigger, so Bailey's taking 3 damage now. I don't know if Josh gets the extra crit. And he gets upset because there's another grade 3 on the last damage. So that's the game, everyone. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to the channel if you like what we're putting out. Look forward to more. Like the video. See you in the next one.